It seems that every week Donald Trump seesaws on how serious he thinks the coronavirus is. Of course, for anyone who's watching, we know the threat is extreme, to say the least. According to writer Joshua Holland, that message might be getting to conservative audiences too. He's here to tell us more about the impact Trump's rhetoric about the virus has had on Trump's base. Josh Holland is a contributor to The Nation, contributing editor to AlterNet, and the host of We've Got Issues. He previously wrote for one of my favorites, Moyers and Company. Josh, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Julianna.
Josh, we right before we started this interview, we were informally discussing how it looks like the DNC is, the Democratic Party is not necessarily going to be having their convention, or at least certainly not the way we've had conventions in the past. We talked a little bit about Bernie Sanders potentially dropping out. And what do you make of, before we get to why we're having you here, what do you make of Joe Biden's response to the coronavirus? He seems to have been, kind of missing until he went on CNN the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there is a larger problem than Biden's response, which is that the Democrats have been uncoordinated. Their messaging on this has been uncoordinated, timid. I think that they're fearful of being accused of politicizing a crisis, and ultimately ineffective. As we can see that there is support for or approval of Trump's response to the crisis is a lot higher than it should be, according to
Really,
any
a lot higher.
objective reality, right? And there is a rally around the flag, rally around the leader effect that occurs during crises. So it's not that surprising that Trump has experienced a bump in the polls, but the Democrats have a couple of problems. One is that they don't yet have, at this point, there is no clear party leader, right? So once you have a nominee, that is the leader of the party. Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee, but he is not the nominee. He's barred from coordinating with the DNC directly. Um, is Schumer in charge? Is Pelosi in charge? There isn't a
But couldn't Biden just jump out of the gate and say, I this is what I would suggest. These are the suggestions I make. Start doing something to look like Andrew Cuomo looks, like he's in charge.
Yeah, he certainly could. And, there is, I think, concern reportedly, supposedly, according to Ryan Lizza, there is some concern within the campaign that if they go after Trump too hard, it will elicit some sort of blowback, which I think is extraordinarily misguided. What I would like to see them doing, Biden and Democrats in general, and I don't know that Biden is the right person for this. I mean, Biden's lost a few steps for sure since his peak
I feel
and
like
his.
nominating Biden is, we're just going to have the weekend at Bernie's presidency for 4 years, where they
I
have
mean,
a
that's the best case scenario, right? I mean, that's the best case scenario. So, um, yeah, I don't know that he's the best spokesperson. They need to get somebody out there.
is it
I mean, I think that they should have somebody be, in a parliamentary system, you would have a shadow, secretary of health. And that person would hold regular briefings and bring in public health experts. I've always thought that you could actually politicize it without politicizing it. If you modeled um, seriousness and a commitment to science and evidence based response to this pandemic, if you modeled that, if you didn't, if you held regular briefings that were informative, that didn't cause people to go drink pool cleaner, that didn't offer misleading bullshit and promises of miracle cures and stuff like that, that would be a potent political message by contrasting it with the Donald Trump pandemic hour.
I've been watching Gavin Newsom in California, and also, of course, obviously Cuomo here in New York.
Yeah.
And, love him or dislike Cuomo, he certainly comes off as someone you want in charge during a pandemic. And he is a very shrewd politician. You might not like what he does, but he's very shrewd. Can we get Cuomo?
I mean, it doesn't work that way. I don't know what would happen if I don't want to talk about it. I'm uncomfortable talking about this, but let's say Joe Biden
What else do you have to do?
were
What?
to come down with were to contract this virus.
No, I don't want to see. Yeah.
I
Or he
mean,
just decides it's not for him for some reason as being the
I don't
president.
see that happening, right? I mean, there would have to be some sort of event that would change the course of this. At this point, if you look at politically, nothing is going to change. Joe Biden has a 25-point lead over his top rival. He has a 300 delegate lead. Sanders is the only candidate still in it other than him, and would need to win 60% of the remaining delegates. It's not going to change politically, right? So um, I don't know what I'm talking about. So yeah,
I don't know. I'm
where
just
are we?
hoping that for a miracle, some sort of
Yeah, I
leader,
mean,
leader.
it's look,
Like,
people played pundit this time. There were a number of polls that showed, the polls that explicitly asked, regardless of who you think is the best bet to beat Trump, who would you want to have be president? This was back when there was a wide field. And Biden never won those polls. It was usually Warren who won those polls. But people were for, oh, what if a woman can't win? What about, and here we are. Everybody plays Chris Cillizza and tries to game out who would best be equipped to beat Trump instead of approaching it like, okay, the primaries is when I express who I want and who is, I think is the best bet to be president, and then let the chips fall where they may. That's how we should be doing this.
Mhm.
And if everybody did do it that way, one would imagine that you would usually get a strong candidate. You
um,
know, wisdom of the crowds.
excuse me. Shifting gears over to what we your most recent or one of your recent pieces. Trump supporters are sticking with him, but do they believe what he or Fox News says about COVID-19? How do we've been I've been talking about this and talking about it here on this
It's
program.
it's impossible not to obsess over this weird thing that has happened where it's become a partisan hot potato, right? I've also really obsessed over this consistent finding that conservatives are like, they think it's a minor thing. They're more likely to think that it's a minor thing that's being blown out of proportion by the media and Democrats to hurt Trump's reelection chances, which is an absolutely batty belief, of course, because, well, I mean, this is a global pandemic, so why are all these Italians dying to hurt Donald Trump's reelection chances? Just
That's why.
it makes no sense. I mean, they are dedicated to the hoax. I mean, they're really, but
But even those, there's like serious hoaxers on the internet. But then there are people like my relatives in upstate New York and some parts of Pennsylvania that are conservative or that are not even, maybe not conservative, but watch a Sinclair media
yes,
local news. And they are, one of them is over 75 and still has her son who works at the hospital coming home to live with them without gloves, with no mask. I'm like, my head is exploding here. And the others are saying, why are you wearing a mask when I take a selfie of myself going to the grocery store?
yeah.
It's insane.
So it is insane. But then I noticed this poll finding in the Navigator research poll. Instead of asking whether people believed that this was serious, they asked about what behavioral changes they were making. And what I was surprised to see was that Republicans, self identified Republicans, tell pollsters that they are doing everything that Democrats tell pollsters they're doing. They're staying home, they're avoiding crowded places, they're doing all the right things. The rates were extremely similar, maybe 2 points higher among Democrats than Republicans. So, what I took away from this is that yes, they do believe his political rhetoric around it. They do believe that it is being inflated by Trump's opponents to hurt his reelection chances, and yet um, they don't believe. And he's obviously changed his tune in recent days, but they don't believe that this is something that can't hurt them. They are behaving as if it is, in fact, a very, very serious public health crisis. And in a sense, I find that encouraging because, yes, they're still embracing silly conspiracy theories, but they're washing their damn hands and staying away from crowds by and large. Obviously not perfect compliance, but at similar rates than Democrats. So this partisan gap in perception doesn't appear to be translating into a partisan gap of behavior. And part of that, of course, is Trump changing his tune, right? I mean, I got into an argument with a Republican official from California the other day who was mocking the idea that the death toll could be in the hundreds of thousands, right? And so that came out of the White House this week, the 100,000 to 240,000
It's hard because then you start being like,
estimate.
well, I'll show you. It's going to be, I'll wait for those. I want 200, no.
Yeah, you don't want to root for the
You
big
don't
death
want to root
toll
for that.
to own the Republicans. No, that's not a good thing.
Here's the thing that I think Trump is doing that is actually quite genius in either his idiocy or his, his, he has perfected narcissism, right? So he
Yes,
basically is saying it's not a big deal and it is a big deal. So when they say, you said it's not a big deal, he can point to, I said it's a big deal. And when they say, you said it was a big deal, he can say, no, I said we were going to get out by Easter. He's covering his ass in every area. It's a big ass to cover too.
well, look, I mean, any normal president would be managing the public health crisis. He is not. He is managing the PR crisis, and that has been first and foremost, and that's very obvious from his new TV show. Um, he is relentlessly focused on the political repercussions, and I mean, any president would think about the politics, but would be first and foremost focused on the pandemic itself. um, and I say that I think that's true of other Republican presidents as well.
We
he,
haven't
he's
seen
he's unique in that, in his lack of seriousness in governing, right?
we have not seen his, the red states really other than Louisiana, which I think is still purple on some area,
No,
mostly red, but kind
Louisiana,
of purple.
red.
Red.
Florida, maybe purplish.
Hmm. We have not seen very many red states get the big pandemic yet. Do you
Yeah,
think that as the sickness or the COVID spreads across the country, people will change their minds about how Trump is handling it? Or will
I
he just
do.
find some you do?
I do. I mean, I've never believed in the unshakable base. I know people who do. I know people who believe Trump's numbers are impenetrable. His favorability will always be 41% or 40%, something like that. That's his floor. I've never believed that, in part because I remember when George Bush was, Teflon, and reality intrudes. I think that. So I wrote a piece last week about why COVID trutherism is so popular on the right. And one of the reasons that I think is true is that, so far it has not been personal to a lot of conservative communities. Once once your cousin is it on a ventilator, or God forbid dies,
We're not
when you
given a
know
ventilator.
when you know people, when it's in your community, um, it's different, and you can't wish it away. I mean, you're not going to blame the media when there's actually when they pull up the refrigerated truck to the hospital in your community, like they have been in Brooklyn. You're not going to be like, oh boy, media's really hyping this.
Yeah. Oh. um,
But that does get back to, let's hope that Democrats start messaging better on this and start coordinating their messaging a little bit better, because it has not been effective so far.
who do you think would be the best leader for the Democratic Party at this point to come out and sort of assume that leadership position? Is it Pelosi?
Probably not Pelosi. I mean, Pelosi's skills have never been, that has never been her foremost talent in terms of communication. She's always been like sharp parliamentarian. That's her reputation. I don't know. Like I think that these governors are really taking. They're showing how this should be done. Um, Gavin Newsom has not been getting as much credit as Cuomo, in part because the media all live in New York, right?
Yes.
So, like, that's a big part of it. But he's been doing very effective communications, as has Inslee in Washington. So those guys are not getting as much attention as Cuomo is, but all three of them are doing a very, very good job. And one of the things about Cuomo that's interesting, I meant to mention this when we talked about him earlier, is that he is not. I'm not a Cuomo fan at all. But my
I just
issues
like
with
the
him,
accent.
uh,
I just like
I've got long-standing problems with Cuomo. But my problems with him are political, and what he's doing now is showing how a competent executive functions. This isn't about the politics of it. This is about providing solid information, trusting public health experts, and making strong decisions early on, as early as the information suggests, and communicating it clearly. So this is just my problems with him have nothing to do with what he's doing now, and he's doing an excellent job uh, managing this situation with competence. Competence and ideology are two separate things.
it's shocking to see competence. I think competence might be even enough.
Honestly, like one of the things that I'm surprised at is how 3 years of Trump has not elevated competence over ideology to a greater degree. Like
Mm.
I really want somebody competent. And one of the things that I'm a little disappointed in personally about this Democratic primary process is that I don't think Biden is the most competent. He's not my ideological cup of tea, and he doesn't scream competence to me. So it's like
I mean, it's not that
I'm
I don't
not
really
thrilled with
think
the
he's
outcome.
honestly going to do anything. He's going to just bring in the Obama cabinet or Obama like cabinet, and they're just going to do Obama again. I really don't think
Yeah, I mean, worse things could happen than that. I mean, it could be even, yeah.
he's
Look,
far more
look.
competent than Trump, I would say.
Oh God,
He's just out of touch.
in case there's any confusion, Biden would be 1,000 times better than Trump. And Biden comes with not Bill Barr. Biden comes with not Steve Miller, making immigration policy. There's no question. This isn't a not a dime's worth of difference or lesser of two evils argument. I think that if the primaries had been structured differently and had played out differently, we probably could have ended up with a stronger candidate.
Have
That's
you
all.
seen Katie Halper's interview with
Tara Reid.
yes. How do you think that is going to play out? I'm slightly concerned.
I mean, if you're not concerned, you're just not paying attention. I mean,
We
look at what's going
uh,
on. I I don't know how that's going to play out. I will say this.
it's like circling up the firing squad. We've got a rapist on the other side. We're
God.
like, we can't shoot the rapist, so let's shoot the diddler. I, Christ.
I mean, look, you got a locust outbreak in China. They're expecting the worst hurricane season coming up, and we have a compromised candidate going up against a fascist crackpot. It's not a good time for
It's not
America.
good. It's not good.
No, there's nothing good going on. I will say this: I'm less surprised by the media, the mainstream press's hesitation to report these allegations than other people are, given the totality of circumstances. And part of that is that. So I guess we should tell listeners the basic facts. This woman, who is a former aide of Joe Biden, um, first alleged that he had been creepy towards her a couple of years ago. which was consistent with other women's accounts, many other women's accounts. And then more recently, she went on Katie Halper's show and said that he had sexually assaulted her in a much more serious way. Um, so I think that part of the hesitation for the mainstream press is that they they ran with scandals generated the by partisan media outlets in 2016 and got burned pretty badly. Faced a lot of criticism for that. Um, and then the nature of the allegation shifted, and what began as something that was consistent with other stories about Biden became an allegation that was inconsistent with what others have said. What
So
with
like shoulder groping and weird
oh,
comments moved to like
the
hand up
creepy
the
uncle thing. Yeah, the creepy uncle thing is pretty well established. I think if Ronan Farrow had reported this, they would run with it.
Mm.
I think Katie Halper is of course a big Bernie fan, and this is it was there is it's not as mysterious to me as to why the mainstream press is not running with this story as it is to others.
Okay, well that's good. I needed some explanation. She was supposed to come on our show last week and might be coming on this week, next week. I don't know. It's tough. That's the tough
Yeah.
thing. This here's a question from this. I think this question, I believe, from Shaggy Two Fang from our stream chat puts in context everything that we've been discussing here. Question: which Biden vice presidential pick could sway Bernie supporters toward Gropey Joe?
I
Good question.
okay, so I don't put that much weight in vice presidential picks. I don't. I just don't. Um, I can't imagine anybody would swing people towards Joe. I do believe that the Bernie or bust contingent is. Uh, I believe that entire storyline is very much exaggerated, and I think that it's.
Let's do. Oh, I want to talk more about that because I am terrified of Bernie or bust,
I
folks.
mean, you should be terrified of everything. That's my baseline. There's no reason not to be terrified of everything. But also, some threats are overblown. So let us talk about that. We're in the midst of a primary, and 15% of Sanders supporters, according to a recent poll, said that they will not vote for Joe Biden. A lot of people were freaked out by that, right? And the context is that that is half of the rate that said the same thing in 2016 at this point.
Oh well,
Half.
that's a plus. That's good.
That's half as many as said the same thing with Hillary Clinton, who was a uniquely unpopular candidate among the left for a variety of
But now
reasons.
we've had Trump.
But now we've had Trump in
All of that, there's no
2016.
all of that. Trump and Hillary, both sides do it. They're both terrible. It's both awful. It's
Look,
just proven to be bullshit.
in 2016, almost everybody was convinced that Trump could not win and that you would have Hillary Clinton. And so, if you didn't like Hillary Clinton, you kind of had the luxury of just sitting it out because, okay, at least that ridiculous game show guy isn't going to get in. So
Yeah.
it's safe. And then there were also people who believed that if he did win, and this was fairly prevalent, he would stop campaigning and he would grow into the job and take it much more seriously and be constrained by congressional Republicans and advisors and blah, blah, blah. And now I think this is the biggest difference between 2016 and 2020. We know exactly what we're dealing with and we know he can win. And so I think that people say I would never vote for Joe Biden against Trump. I think some of them absolutely mean it during the primaries. Then we're going to have 4 or 5 months of him bragging about how great he did keeping the death toll to 200,000 and blathering on about the caravan that is going to appear, and threatening to suspend the election. And I think that at the end of time, I don't see a lot of people skipping the election, and we don't know what kind of election we're going to have. So I don't know. It's very
Well,
hard to
if
predict
the
what's going to
Democratic
happen.
convention, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. If the Democratic convention is, significantly changed from history, I'm assuming the election itself will also be significantly changed.
I mean, there was like going to be a big effort to make sure that everybody had picture ID who lived in voter ID states. Maybe we need to make sure everybody knows how to get like an envelope and a stamp.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, put this thing, like, fill it out, and
Stamps.
how
They
to work
shouldn't
a
even
stamp.
just
Like, do
just
young people know how to work a stamp?
they no, and they should just not put stamps on stuff. Just send it back for free.
Send it
Right?
back for free. Yeah, right.
People don't have money for stamps, Josh.
That's right.
What are they, 50 cents now? It's a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I
All
haven't
right.
thought.
Well, thank you for coming on with me. I really appreciate
My
it. It's
pleasure,
always fun.
Juliana. Okay.
I feel like we should drink on these things somehow. Like
Next
when you're like,
let's do
everything is
that.
terrifying, I'm like, where's my
Where's
stash?
my booze? Next time we'll do drinks.
Okay. All right. Hey,
All
thanks a
right.
lot, everybody. I appreciate it. Bye, Josh. Have a good
Bye,
one.
Juliana. Thank you.
That was Joshua Holland. You can follow him on Twitter at Joshua HOL, and find all his writing everywhere in the nation, alternate the other places.